Okay, so although the date on the opener says 4/26, it's actually May 6th. So today's date is May 6th. The directions say, use the MA method in the area model to factor. So what I recommend that you do is get your notes out from last week where it says using MA method to factor and have those out. Remember, we didn't take notes on the front side of that sheet. We just started on the back sheet. I would use those 5 steps to help determine how to get this started. So if you're looking at your note sheet, yep. So if you're looking at your note sheet, step 1 says to determine the M and determine the A. You determine the M by taking your first coefficient, which basically means your number, times your third coefficient. So if I take my first coefficient times my third coefficient, that's going to equal what? 12. Then my A is going to be my second coefficient. So what's my second number? Just the number. 7. Okay. Now this is where you use your factor sheet. So instead of listing all the factors for 12, look on your blue factor sheet, find the number 12, because your M is 12, so you find your 12. So there you have your factor pairs. Which of those factor pairs can you now add together to get 7?
3 and 4.
3 and 4. So you're 3 and 4. So we get to skip that step of making all our factor pairs because our factor sheet has it. So that was step 1. Step 2 says determine what the MA is, which we just did, which is 3 and 4, meaning I can multiply 3 times 4 to get 12, but take those same numbers and add them together to get 7. Step 3 then tells me I'm going to take these two numbers and put them in the top right and bottom left of my area model. Now, it doesn't matter which number you put where. However, I always like to put my smaller number in my top right just because it's going to be easier to find the greatest common factor. So I'm going to put my 3 here and my 4 here. Now, if you remember, this 3 and 4 is going to equal that 7F. Okay, if I add those two together, it's going to equal up to 7F. So what variable needs to be with that 3 and 4 in the area? F. Okay, so if this here, the 7F, equals the area of these two rectangles, what's going to be the area of my first rectangle? 3F squared. And then what's going to be the area of my bottom right rectangle? 4. There you go. That's all of step 3. So you start filling out your area model. Step 4 then says, factor the top row, finding what the greatest common factor is. So you can do this in 2 ways. So we're looking at this top row here, okay? We're looking at those two numbers. What you can either do is make a factor tree for each of those numbers, or you can just think, what's the largest number that both 3's can be divided by? Or what number do they both share? This one's easy because they're the same. So what's the largest number? What number do they share? Right. Yeah, who said it? 3. Yeah. So the greatest common factor for this top row is going to be 3. And where does my greatest common factor go? The top, the outside, because it represents the height. Okay? So then what variable do they both share? F. So the height of this first rectangle is 3F. So from here, I just fill out the rest of my area model. So I'm just kind of focused on the top row right at this exact second. So what I'm trying to find is the width of my top row because I know my height and I know my total area. So I have to think to myself, 3F times what will get me to 3F squared? 9. Well, think about it. Just say it again, AJ. F. Because 3 times 1 will get me to 3. If I have 1 up here and 2 down here, I need 1 more F. So as AJ said, we can just use F, or if you like to use the number, you can go ahead and put the number 1F.
I'm confused.
Why are you confused?
I thought you had to multiply the 3.
No, because you're thinking, remember, area equals height times width equals my total area. So we have to think 3, my height, times what's my width to get my area here. So my width of this first rectangle is what?
1.
1F. So if the width of the rectangle is 1F up here, what's it going to be down here? 1F. And I put width first or second. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that width on down so I don't forget about it. Okay? Now I need to find the width of my second rectangle. So here I have to think 3F times what gets me to 3F? 1. So the width of my second rectangle is 1. Ooh, that's odd. There we go. So if this width is 1, then what's this width going to be? 1. And the width you said comes second. So I have all my information for the top of my area model. Now I need to find it for the bottom. What am I missing on my bottom here? What don't I know about my bottom rectangle? Say it again. The height. So here you just think, what times 1F equals 4F? Say it again. 4. If I plug in 4 times 1, does that equal 4? Yeah, so it works. So the height of my bottom is going to be 4. Okay, we're almost done now. So now we have, remember this is my area. Area equals height times width. What's my height?
Your height is 4.
What's my height?
3F.
Plus,
Plus 4.
and I put parentheses around that,
F.
times what's my width?
1F plus 1.
There you go. That's it. Okay.
So Ms. Lidicky,
Yes.
the one on the bottom,
Can you put your headphones away?
Alright, okay. The one in the middle, is that still the same one? Is that A? Is that how you get A? Whichever one's in the middle, you write it down for A?
Mm-hmm. Kinda.
What you mean?
I'll show you. We have one more problem on the back. Well, it depends on how you're asking it. So,
Okay, my second question was, what if we got 2 numbers in the middle?
We're gonna- why don't we just get to the next example? I think when you see it all put together.
Alright.
If you have this all down, flip it to the back and see if you can work on the back. And remember, have your registers out. I'm gonna grab this. Alex, I need to print you one still.
I got mine, I found it.
Oh, you found it?
I don't want to take you, I have the one.
Start the stack here. All right, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds and then I'm going to move on. Daisha, register. Oh, there it is. Bless you. All right, here we go. Backside. David, what happened? Oh, oh no, what'd you do?
Ask me what this.
Okay. Okay, what would make it easier for you to fix it? Do you just want a new one and we can excuse you from the front one? Okay, we can do that for sure. All right, so the back side here, it's the exact same thing, except for obviously different numbers. So we're gonna follow the same steps. Use the MA method and the area model to factor. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is determine what the M is. I determine what the M is by looking at my notes and seeing how I determine what the M is. How do I determine what the M is, Deja?
You multiply 6 times 3.
Good, you take your first coefficient times your third coefficient, and when you multiply that together, what do you get?
17.
Okay, then your A is your
17.
second coefficient. Now, this is where you guys use these blue sheets that I gave you. So because your M is 72, you find your 72 on your factor sheet. Then you look and determine which of those numbers under 72 can you add together to get 17. So this is going to be your MA. So 8, 9. So there's step 2 you did of your notes. Step 3 says to put what you found for your MA and your upper right and bottom left area models as the area. So this 8 and 9, Kaylon, this 8 plus 9 will get us to that 17. Okay? So, again, I always put my smaller number top right because it's easier to factor. And I take my bigger number and put it in bottom left. Now, if you would flip those, it would not be wrong. Your answer will just be reverse of what we end up getting. What variable now needs to go with that 8 and 9? G. So here, I'm just filling in the area for each rectangle. So what's this first area going to be then?
6G to the second.
Okay. And what's going to be the area of my bottom right rectangle? I heard it. 12. Okay. So that's step 3. So if you're looking at your notes, you know you're done with step 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 then tells you find the greatest common factor of the top row here. So we need to find the greatest common factor for 6 and 8. Because they are smaller numbers, we don't necessarily have to use a factor tree. You can set and think either what's the largest number that 6 and 8 can both be divided by, and if you don't know that, then use your factor tree. But if you can save yourself a little bit of work, I would just think, what's the biggest number that 6 and 8 are both divisible by?
4.
Can I take 6 and divide it by 4?
No.
2. 2. And what variable do they both share?
G.
So this becomes my what?
Your height.
The height of my top row, right? Because right now I'm just focusing on the top.
Let's look.
Yes.
So, how did you map out which one goes in?
Because they go in order. First, second, third, fourth.
Alright,
And that second, third is split from my MA.
okay.
Okay? Now, let's say that you didn't know that 6 and 8 were divisible by 2. Remember, you guys, you can come over here and do your factor trees. Okay? Come over to the left, do your factor trees, and you'll find that the greatest common factor is 2. Okay, I know my height. I know my total area. So now I'm ready to find the width of my top row. Now, once I find the width of my top row, that also gives me the width of my bottom row. So I think to myself, 2 times what gets me to 6? 3. And I heard it again. Somebody said G, right?
Yep.
So 3G. The width is 3G. So if the width is 3G up above, it's also going to be the same thing down below. So I'm just going to bring my width and put it into both area models, or both boxes. So now I'm ready to find the width of my second one. So I think 2G times what gets me to 8G? 4. So my width here is 4. So if my width up here is 4, then I know my width down here is 4. So what do I need to find for my bottom row?
Which one?
I know my width for my bottom row.
Oh, the height.
The height. So I just think what times 3G will get me to 9G? 3. Well, if I put in 3 times 4, will that equal 12? Yeah, so my height is in fact 3. Last thing, we have my area. So area equals height. What's my height here?
2G plus 3G.
2G plus 3.
3.
Because we're doing, remember we have to do this height plus this height times my width. What's my width?
3G plus 1.
And that's your final answer there.